I'd like to give my special thanks to SME for Labour, particularly for hosting tonight's very important discussion. My name is Spencer Pitfield. I'm founder and director of SPL Strategies. We're a Westminster-based consultancy. We're here to talk about the clean energy dividend, and in particular what we'd like to talk about today is how these clean, innovative technologies can help really change the landscape of our country. And in this regard, I'm particularly thinking about the most disenfranchised communities across the UK and how this technology can help them to be warmer, to have bills that are a lot cheaper, and there's a great opportunity before us. We have probably the biggest panel that's ever been conceived. There was probably a little bit of a worry that we would not have such a panel, but we have a great panel. We have esteemed colleagues here. So I'm going to start with my colleague McDonagh was here. And I think the easiest thing is if each panellist just introduces themselves very quickly. So I'm going to give everybody 1 minute to just introduce themselves, explain what they do and how they do it. Nick.
Good afternoon, Nick Miles. I'm a director of product innovation at a company called EWI Pro Insulation Systems. We're a national provider of various construction products, but particularly specialising in on the refurbishment side and regeneration. So the reason I'm here on the panel today is to support colleagues within the clean energy sector. It's how we also benefit from the technologies, but fit it into the whole kind of regeneration story. So how do we get improve the existing housing stock and not just for generation, but the look and feel and improving the communities as a result.
Hi, my name is Tony Vaughan. I'm a Labour MP for Folkestone and Hythe in next to Dover on the south coast, where we've got lots and lots of solar farms being applied for under NSIP projects. We were one of the first. We're an area where Ed Miliband opened a wind farm just before the end of the previous Labour government, and we've got potential for new nuclear. So interested in lots of these areas and how they can help.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Julian Wiley. I've been in renewable energy for 24 years. My reason for being here is I have a mission to decentralise solar farms. So it's, instead of doing a solar field and a big battery park, I'd like to put it across social housing. It's decentralised, and the profits that come from those solar farms are shared with the social tenants and the social landlords. And that's me. Thank you.
I'm Neil Mitchell, HSEnergy Group. We've been trading, installing solar battery now for over 10 years, and I've worked with Julian as well to really reduce social tenants' bills immediately and create some revenues for landlords to reinvest in other measures for their properties.
My name's Siobhain McDonagh, and I'm the MP for Mitcham and Morden in South West London and chair of the all-party parliamentary group for temporary accommodation.
Cool.
Hi, my name is Paul Summers. I work for FoxESS. I'm the key account director for Europe. FoxESS is a Chinese manufacturer of solar inverters, batteries, storage. So we actually mine the lithium all the way through to producing batteries and cells which go into your home or go into a field, which are stabilising the grid or saving your home money. And I'm here to support my colleagues from the renewable industry.
Good afternoon, I'm Bill Esterson. I chair the Energy Security Net Zero Select Committee, as well as being the MP for Sefton Central. This is a home conference for me, which you might think is great, but I still have to do my morning and evening routines and get here where you can all just roll out of bed and go to the first event in the morning. But look, my job is as chair of the Select Committee is to hold the government to account, to look at the evidence, to make recommendations to government. We've done just that with their report on heating our homes. Very, very relevant amongst the other work we do to this discussion.
Thank you very much. So that was a very brief introduction to the esteemed panel. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. Just by way of kicking off, what we're really talking about is how innovative technology, the technologies that are before us, can really help to unlock the ability to make homes warmer. And of course, we're waiting for the warmer homes plan to come hopefully shortly. how that innovative technology can perhaps create the revenues to almost fully fund the types of opportunities moving forward. And Neil, if I may, could you just explain to us here today how, if you pair solar with energy storage, how that can create perhaps those revenues that can help to support fabric and improvement to households, particularly social houses?
Last November, Ofgem gave us E415, which allowed us to trade in the wholesale market without going through your electricity supplier. And then with the use of AI technology, we can now basically aggregate energy and create, balance the grid, whether it's a small-scale battery in a house, a large one in a school, and those revenues that are really, instead of Elon Musk popping a big battery somewhere and him making all the money, we can spread that now to social housing tenants, schools, wherever. And use existing connections. There's a battery connection, I think, the new connection is till 2033 right now. We don't need those. We've got 1,000 gigawatts of existing connections we can use and create revenues, and those revenues can go to reducing tenants' bills, actually reduce the need for extra infrastructure. So they say, currently saying we need to spend 75 million on additional infrastructure. Actually, we don't. We can use energy storage to reduce that. And also reduce curtailment costs. I think it's something like $1 billion that can go into batteries and negative prices. So this is about creating money for really or reducing bills for the most vulnerable in society and revenues to then improve their homes. Things like that.
Well, thank you. Julian, could you just build upon that, because you've led a pilot of some 7,000 or so social homes. Could you just explain to us how, building what Neil has said, how that works? Because it sounds pretty complicated to me to get social homes engaged with such a proposal.
Yes, it's been around. Sorry, it's been around a long time now, and the sector is developing. There's quite a few people doing this. So obviously the solar is used in the property. If there's nobody in, then it goes into the battery. So you've got two which they use later. But the real unique selling point that we did on this project, particularly the 7,000, is, and I'll exaggerate a little bit for ease rather than go too technical. So any energy that you do buy from the grid, the software is looking for the cheapest time to buy that kilowatt hour. It might be windy tonight, 2 o'clock, energy price is negative, so the battery will fill up with negative priced energy. You wake up in the morning and your battery's powering your property. Well, that's the first USB. The second USB is you can participate in grid balancing services, so like Elon Musk batteries and lots of other large-scale batteries which we need to balance the grid with renewable energy. That can work in a domestic property, so you are actually getting paid from that battery. And then the third and final one is the AI is working out your usage, and it's working out the use of the battery, and it will buy energy and sell it back to grid more than one time a day, so you become an automatic energy trader. It's all autonomous, it can all work extremely well in social houses, mainly because the normal solar system that's sold costs about £2,000 to find a customer. But if you're putting it on 20,000 social properties, you've immediately saved £2,000 on the cost. The installs are much cheaper, so it's fundable for a funder to come in. We're talking to High Street Bank that will fund this, and hopefully we'll prove the concept for 7,000. Funders need to get comfortable with it, and that's one of the main problems we have.
Well, and I'll bring in our colleagues all in the mix. Well, can I just talk to you about the GMAX battery? Because there was a small shudder when you mentioned China. But of course, most of the technology is coming from China. And of course, just to say there are good and bad suppliers of this technology. But could you just give us a bit more information about GMAX and how that could benefit schools and homes particularly?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there are...
Could you speak into the microphone? Sorry, I'm conscious of this unit behind me here. Can you hear?
Yeah, there are obviously good and bad companies in China, but I think you've got to work with an ethical company that's doing things in the right way, treating their employees correctly, and sourcing them the right way. So that's a for start, we've got a few products for the small scale sector. So this is people who work at a school or an SME, where you can put in a 200 kilowatt hour battery, and that's able to service through solar. You can save the energy in the battery, use it throughout the day, throughout the evening, whenever you need it. But what with Julian was talking about with trading, so you're able to buy energy at sub-zero prices, and the key is we want schools, and we want local councils, and we want people that are on low income to be able to save money or create, and that's what this is able to do. So if we're implementing it into the correct spaces, like a school, schools with no money. So if you're able to save them 25 or 50% on their electricity just because you're buying it at the right time and you're managing that electricity correctly, using these batteries, you're creating jobs, whole
Yes, so if I just come to you, because of course, if we free up those revenues, a key concern that I hear all of the time is that our social housing stock is in a terrible state. 4.4 million social homes in the country, we need many more, but the ones that we have, we've got to improve the fabric of those homes. If we can realise those revenues, it's all about then making sure the fabric of those buildings are improved.
Yes, that's right. So just want to jump back into Julian, what you said. So on something I didn't get a chance to speak to you about, but of the 7,000 homes, what sort of projected incomes can the social landlords realise from whatever contract they get into with the energy supplier? Because in the industry that we're working, we get a lot of frustration from social landlords that just isn't enough. They'd like to do a lot more, so whether it's replace the windows, but there's not enough to do the roof, or they can do the roof but they can't do the walls, etc. What sort of projections are you seeing potentially realised?
So the model really produces about, if you look on the able to pay market, that's an easy way to do it. So we have a demonstration at the moment, and the young lady has zero bill. She used to have £1,000 bill, and at the end of this year she'll have £1,500 in the bank. So you might call that £2,500. We'll call it £2,500 of benefit. Again, coming down to the social sector, instead of that kit being installed for maybe £12,000, you should be able to get that in for about 8,000. You need a bigger battery, so you're able to take the property totally off grid when it needs to be. So the funder is paid back really, and our model is immediately reduce the tenant's bill by 25%. The funder should be paid back in 5 or 6 years. If the tenant has bad debt, first thing you do will pay off the bad debt, then it reduces the bill by 25%, and when the funder's paid back, and there's a 50% reduction on the social tenant's bill. But at that point, the funder goes out of the way, we create a community interest company, and the profits are shared with the landlord, the tenant, and obviously the SPV, the O&M company, to keep the system running. So to answer your question in a small way, I think it will be between £500 and £700 per property per year for the next 30 years, which is the performance warranty of the solar panels.
Julian, thank you.
Sorry, do you think?
John, speaking to the mic.
Sorry, do you think with the discussions you had with private lenders, would they be willing to lend against the life cycle expectancy of those?
So it's been difficult. I've been doing this 8 years, and we failed to get a large American fund to back it 5, 6, 7 years ago. But we have a high street bank, and I probably shouldn't say the name.
Please don't.
And
In trouble.
if you think this high street bank funded, I think it was £350 million worth of solar farms and battery parks. So it's the same model, so they totally get it, and they are up for funding. So all being well, we'll be putting 2,500 funded, the bank funding that, and then when the bank sees the revenues, I do think they will probably lend more for the fabric. So we call fabric first, which lots of people will know. I call it fabric second, because the solar and the battery, the revenues that are generated can then be spent on decarbonised low-cost heating and fabric. Again, reducing the bill would reduce to 50%, but also then the heating bill will reduce, and also the electric bill will reduce.
So, thank you. So one of the difficulties here is that it's always difficult to explain to people, firstly, that this isn't some kind of Ponzi scheme or something which is not a sensible way forward, but more importantly, because the revenues are changing all of the time, it's not an exact science about whether you're at 25% or 35% of saving. The reality is that years and years of solar has proved that solar is delivering a cost benefit. And so really, Bill, with our elected colleagues here, and thank you for being here, I know you've got to dash off shortly. We're really interested to know and understand, given that from what I understand, there are funders there ready to fund this. There is a clear benefit to social tenants. How it's where we can do more this time.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Solar is the cheapest way of generating electricity. That's important to state. But take a step back from solar. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because if we don't, we won't have a planet to live on for our children and our grandchildren. I think we've lost sight of that a bit in the debate about the energy transition. We need to remind people of it. It's really fundamental. There's a lot of support for that position. There aren't that many climate deniers, but the climate deniers are trying to make their case for some of the conservative party especially. So how do we address that? We address it not just by reiterating the importance of taking action, but by demonstrating the benefits. And this whole space is where the benefits really are most obvious, most easily achieved, and will make most difference. It is about lower bills, of course it is. It is about reducing emissions. This is about healthier homes too. We have many people both living in energy poverty, and the committee wrote about this in our report, but are also living in homes that are damp, that have mould, and that are bad for their health. So this whole agenda is a great way of improving people's health as well as reducing their bills and making their homes warmer. Not entirely agree about it being fabric second. I think it's fabric and solar at the same time, actually, because loft insulation is still a very, very efficient and effective way of reducing bills. But nevertheless, solar, battery, and loft insulation, I think, are key. And I think the Warm Homes Plan is going to make a massive difference. The amount of money being put in by government is going to attract the private sector capital that you asked about. It is going to make a big difference. And the government is predicting £500 off bills for social tenants. And these are the people living in fuel poverty. These are the high priority, absolutely. And I think if we can get this agenda through to people in most need, I think that who are often missed out, so far been missed out in the energy transition, I think there is a chance to really make a difference in taking people with on this hugely important aspect of public policy. And the only thing I would add, probably, because I'll add it now because I'm going to have to go in a minute, but this is jobs as well. This is jobs in every community. So it is a fantastic way of providing support right across the country. This is a decentralised approach by its nature. I think there are great opportunities to use excess generation to help neighbours, to share with the public sector, whether it's schools or other public buildings too. And I think we need to grab the opportunity both ways.
Could I just add, Bill? I think the commercial model doesn't need government money. And the state of the public coffers at the moment, if we can do this with commercial banks lending money and the profit pay for itself, it saves the taxpayer.
Yeah, I completely agree, and we've taken some evidence as a committee about the kind of financing that's needed. I think for some of the poorest in society, there's most fuel poverty. Public money is going to be essential to do this quickly, but we also need to encourage, whether it is leasing or rental of equipment, whether it's going through green mortgages, those people who are going to need some kind of financing to take advantage of this, and so it isn't, we're not missing out a big part of the community. And I mean, the other aspect you touched on a bit, taking advantage of when energy is plentiful is a really important aspect of this. And I was very encouraged by what the government announced over the summer about allowing the energy companies to explore different tariffs far more. There's already some quite innovative stuff going on to get the benefits of cheap electricity at different times of the day. And I already use an overnight tariff because I'm an electric vehicle. I charge my battery up at the same time, but it's using it on the half-hourly times as well. I think that's the next stage for energy companies to go to, and then we can really start to see the benefits. And the only other point to make is, I hope we will see, we've taken evidence again as a committee, the rebalancing of the levies, so our electricity prices are coming down more and more quickly. We're going to see money off bills, and we've got to see a much sensible way of pricing between electricity and gas.
Thank you so much, Will. Sean, if I could come to you. So really what we're hoping to do with this fast-moving innovative technology is to find a way to improve what is a very poor social. Bill, thank you very much. Conscious you have to go. Thank you for your time.
I'm here and I want to admit to you all, I know very little about clean energy, but I do know a lot about housing. And I have to say to my colleagues on the panel that my experience of all the efforts to make energy cheaper, of all the district housings, all the district heating systems, none of them have ever worked. All of them have been difficult to maintain. All have taken the power from the individual tenant and given it to the system. And the billing systems are often the most opaque. Do you think I'm being unfair?
No, I think you're being very fair.
So that's why I was a bit surprised to be asked to be on this panel, because, these things are done with good intentions, but if they disempower tenants to have control over their own bill, decide how much energy they use and how much they want to spend on energy, then they are not going to work in their interest.
Thank you. So it's a very important aspect because, of course, this is a fast-moving, complicated space.
Yeah.
And the reality is, how do we get a better understanding of that? But you're quite right, it starts with the individual home.
Yeah.
And then being empowered to make the right decisions on their behalf.
And because the technologies are difficult and expensive, often you get into a situation, particularly with leaseholders, the shared ownership leaseholders, that they are charged huge amounts for the repair and improvement of district heating systems. So how does that all work?
This is very different. Sorry, can I
Yes, Neil, as we're talking to you, Tony, I'm coming to you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is good, this is what we want to do, it's an active discussion.
But you're talking about heating systems and mechanical systems.
Neil, can you just speak into the microphone?
Talking about heating systems, mechanical systems, moving parts, things that need a lot of maintenance. We're actually targeting the electricity bill with proven technology. And we're bringing private funders in to do it. So the idea is actually something that gives an instant impact for the tenant. And I agree with you. Some of these they're done with good intentions, but they haven't worked out, and you're almost deploying technology too early. And I even think, air source heat pumps, they've got a right place, but putting it in old housing stock is not working, it's costly. There's actually other technologies out there. My own office, we heat mass, not the air, and I'm able to, this winter, I'll wipe out my gas bill in my office and reduce my electricity bill by using negative energy to heat the office. And it's healthier as well, because we're not circulating the air, people shouldn't be catching viruses so easily. So I completely see where you're coming from. So we're talking about an electric bill with proven technology.
I've been desperate to jump in, sorry, so I agree with you. The old solar systems, it wasn't here, it was much too early. But now the government, Ofgem, DESNZ, they're all they're all changing regulation. so that this can be done. And the revenues to balance National Grid weren't here 7 years ago, and we still reduced bills by 70%. There was no clever technology, it was just solar, the odd battery, but it's the clever technology that makes this work. And I've got to say, it's zero cost to tenant, zero cost to landlord, and half price bills for tenants. So there's no risk for a landlord, and this scheme, I agree with you, the funder wouldn't do it if it didn't work out.
Thank you, Tony. Over to you. I mean, what I would say is that clearly, if you're a tenant and you're in a housing association, for instance, there's going to have to be a clear lead from the housing association to take that forward, because whilst the technology seems to be pretty straightforward and there's less moving parts, so less that can break, the reality is it's going to be complex to set up the legal structures in order to allow such technology to benefit people. And clearly this is where elected colleagues come in, because the technology can't deliver the sites out.
Yeah, totally, and it has to be a baseline for this whole discussion that the technology actually works, or else nobody will employ it. But also, there has to be an obvious commercial reason to adopt it. I mean, at the moment, we've got a situation where, as I said earlier, we've got a nationally strategic infrastructure project happening in my constituency, where there are loads and loads of solar companies that are going right in there to apply to get their massive projects picked up, because the commercial upsides are so significant. Now, that commercial upside is driving the interest and is driving huge amounts of interest. Now, if it were the case that there was a similar level of commercial upside for this, that the market ought to operate so as to bring those operators in. And the other important point to make is that Bill said something interesting earlier, which was that you need to take people with us. Now, that's really important, because in the case of putting a solar panel on your roof and generating an obvious return for the tenant, that is a no-brainer. And if we're in a situation where we have that technology and the technology works, who's going to disagree with that? I would much rather that we had much more of that and fewer large projects which were covering very, very large amounts of rural areas with solar panels, because I think while we do need some of those kinds of developments, in areas where they're all being put in the same place, there is a serious issue about legitimacy. Now, you can't deny the fact that there are communities who will want something out of it. And it kind of goes without saying that although you have in these kind of projects community benefit funds, if it were the case that those communities were actually getting reduced cost energy, or that they were getting other benefits, then people might be slightly more for them. In this kind of model, if you're able to scale it to such a degree that people can do it for essentially no cost, or that the risk is absorbed somehow within legislation, so that the government can underwrite that while the market can then operate to proliferate this technology everywhere, it's going to reduce bills. I think that's absolutely fundamental, and because ultimately, if you can reduce bills using this technology, we've got to do it. But obviously, the framework needs to be right, and the incentive needs to be right.
Thank you so much. Nick, last you touched upon this earlier in the discussion. Clearly, what's key to this is we have housing stock, particularly social homes, that haven't had money, or the right amount of money invested into them for many years. They're in a dilapidated stage. When you were touching on this, before we were talking about air quality and all of those very important things, damp. How can such an approach release the revenues so that housing associations, for instance, can start to reinvest the benefit of those revenues into the fabric of those buildings?
I mean, as you said, Spencer, if you can decipher the complicated potential legal structures around funding these, releasing the funds to do more of the regeneration stuff, then it's a win-win. And as I said, so the social landlords, what the biggest frustration is that they're not doing enough for the tenants. So whilst it is ultimately novel to take the bills down and from the electricity point of view store it in a battery, ultimately there is swathes of housing nationwide, whether it's England or in the sub-regions, that are just leaking energy left, right and centre. So whilst you're taking the electricity, potentially powering electric heaters or what have you, but it's the property is still leaking a lot of energy. So I suppose we have a duty of care as well to make the property more airtight, and as Bill rightfully said, make the homes healthier. So from a, if you're a person with respiratory ailments, for instance, one of the worst things you can have is a drafty property, because not only does that bring in damp and condensation, all those things, it makes the underlying conditions worse, and then we have associated added on cost onto our health service and so forth. So those are important things, but I suppose just my point back to our elected colleagues there is, and Siobhain's sort of touched a bit of a nerve, and I think if I go to Tony and Siobhain, is there anything that we as the industry can do to make what we're talking about simpler and more adoptable by tenants and the public? Is there something that we as industry can take away as learnings to, so once if the technology is possible, how can we sort of get the hearts and minds so we're not just there as a commercial solution, but it's there. Ultimately, it's a social thing. It's a social value, and it's a people thing.
I'd say a solid proof of concept somewhere that you can refer to where it's worked on a fairly large scale, and there have been clear benefits for the tenants.
So I think it's important. We keep coming back to, and this is where I think that the complicated legal structures, particularly of housing associations. There has been a change in recent years, and that's been that more local authorities and housing associations are clubbing together into bigger entities, and they're doing that because they have a better buying power, but it seems that they can trade in a more direct way in all of these fast-moving spaces. Paul, did you want to come in?
Yeah, as I say, we're saying complicated legal. It's not complicated legal. It's power purchase agreements, which are commonplace. Thousands of schools have power purchase agreements. The reason we're putting fully funded batteries, particularly on schools, is actually that's increasing for them their self-consumption and making those power purchase agreements more effective for them. So this is just transferring that same sort of legal framework over to a social landlord. And we've got proof of concept of 7,000 houses. So show the benefits.
So, Julian, do you just want to explain a bit more about the 7,000 houses, just to respond directly to Tony? Because this is why we're here. We're here to raise these pilots, what's happening now.
Yes, the 7,000 properties, they were able to pay properties, which still demonstrates the concept. Not the concept, it's the wrong word. It demonstrates that the system works. I think the biggest credibility factor here is that DESNZ, Ofgem, National Grid, all the regulatory bodies now are changing the rules to make this happen in houses. So they believe it, they've seen it work, not just on our model, there's lots of other companies doing this. So it's not a case of will the technology work? And I'm feeling that people are feeling it doesn't work. It absolutely does work. Just to hammer this home. Solar farms are very profitable, that's why they're doing them. Battery parks are very profitable. I reiterate, the bank lent 350 million for those because they've got a good return. Doing it on social houses is just a better way of doing it. Better resilience for National Grid. You're giving the profits to the, I'm sorry, I'm being very repetitive, but it's common sense to me.
Forgive the ignorance. So in the case of a housing association that might want to do this but doesn't have the cash, who is going to lend them the money to upfront buy the capital to install this? So
we're working with Efficiency North, they're a government procurement group. They've got 1,000 property trial ready for us to go ahead and 130,000 properties behind that. Government have changed regulation already, regulations have been changed to make this work.
Sorry, who's going to essentially give the loan for the upfront purchase of the capital equipment?
All the banks that are funding the solar farms.
But that's just within this pilot, is it?
Well, when it's a pilot, it's a pilot for the funder. So if I was to say what's my main ask for government, if you look at the banks, historically they've seen the social housing sector as bad risk. But actually, because there's a lot of revenue coming into this model, it pays off the bad debt. So it's actually less risk. Well, there's not really risk in the solar farm, but it's more profitable, less risk, and better social impact. So it's just a model that's proven in the UK. Lots of banks are funding it. just they want to see the bad debt risk. So there's one of the asks is that the revenues become more, not merchant revenues. So there's I don't want to get too technical, but there's an auction called the capacity market auction, which is able to call on the batteries when the national grid needs power. They're calling all these big batteries, or they're calling all the small batteries. And one of the things you could do is say, right, okay, we're going to give priority to social projects. So it's £65 a kilowatt. That £65 at the moment is going to massive corporates, or £65,000 a megawatt in their case. But that money should be weighted to be given to social impact projects and kept onshore. Why would we give it to offshore companies?
It's about fairness, because at the moment what you're seeing is big enterprise and offshore enterprise making money out of the consumer. Right? That is what is happening right now. So with this model, where you are putting an asset, a battery asset into somebody's home that's maybe on low income, maybe a single parent family, who don't have the extra cash to spend on additional energies or heating or this or that. So instead of filling the pockets of offshore, we're able to spread that profit between social, between tenants and between the council and the investor. So everybody's win-win-win.
So are there enough funders that are climbing over each other to sell this stuff to housing associations?
I've got a European funder. They look at it in Europe. I'd say, like Julian's quite right, perhaps in Britain they're a little bit more concerned with the funders, and they like the capacity market, 15-year certainty. In Europe they've been backing energy trading. So we've got a European funder as well who's ready to come in and quite happy with this. So they've already signed for doing batteries for schools. They should be signing for doing social houses as well. And again, they want to see that trial, they want to see that work, so there's an appetite on both sides.
Could I just, Neil, and then we'll open up for questions. Could you just explain a little bit more? We talked earlier about GMAX and about how
Wanted to do it for schools initially. The funder likes the fact they're public buildings because there's some security. They've given us an initial 10 million fund with more to follow once they're out there. We're mainly targeting schools that are already producing solar, and we found quite a few that they haven't hit their power purchase agreement percentage, so they're saying they're supposed to use 60% of the energy. It might be underperforming, which can cost them. The battery ups it. It looks like from our modelling 25 to 30%, so suddenly they're not only hitting their PPA, but they're getting more low cost energy. Funder simply gets all his money back and interest, and then we transfer the asset to a community interest company, non-profit, to manage them as a group. So it's a win for everybody.
So this is clearly going on. I'm going to throw it open to the floor if there are questions. This is good, gentlemen.
13% is quite low on our model. Again, just to...
I think he's being supportive.
Yes,
very supportive.
I wanted to argue that.
Yeah.
So most people that have solar like that, they really understand that. Again, just to give you the superior benefit on social housing, so obviously we're on the same side here. You probably paid £15,000 for your system, but because you're doing it in bulk, it's half the price now, so it means it can be paid back quickly. We get more revenues now, so you will be able to buy the little piece of technology. One of ours is called the yellow box, and you plug it in, all it does is automatically grid trade all the time and put you into these services. It's really very simple. The banks like it. The banks are, I think the social housing sector, it's just a bad debt risk sector, so they don't like it. It's been quite hard to persuade people to do it. One of the biggest problems is they don't want 20,000 single customers, all bad debt. The way that I've overcome it is said, right, okay, there's a revenue coming in of maybe £1,500. So even if you don't get the PPA part, the power purchase agreement from the tenant, we will still pay your system back. So it's coming very quickly. I think you'll see hockey stick growth when all the funders understand that, as you're seeing in the large solar parks, because it's a great return on investment. But this is a better return on investment. The power purchase agreement saving the retail price of energy is better than the CFD price for large solar parks.
Thank you, we're on the same side.
Yeah, gentleman there. Do this gentleman here first and then go to the gentleman there.
Hiya, my name's Nye. I'm from Generation Rents. We campaign for private renters across the UK. And private renters are the most likely to live in fuel poverty of any type. 1 in 5 private renters in fuel poverty. So it's really welcome that the government is mandating landlords improve private rented properties up to at least EPCC by 2030, because that investment just hasn't been there. But we have kind of 2 major concerns around this work that I'd be interested in the panel's views on. One are obviously landlords are not experts in retrofit or clean energy, and how can the government support them to not make kind of the cheapest, most short-term decisions when investing in properties? And 2, do they agree, and this one might be more for Tony and Siobhain, do they agree that without limits on how much landlords can raise the rent post-retrofit, any improvements could play into reform's narrative that net zero actually ends up costing working people?
Could I just ask Nick to respond very quickly about the retrofit part of that? It's a very, very good point, because how do you regulate that?
That's a very, very good question. Yeah. So one of the things we are closely following is the warmer homes plan. Although we believe majority of that will go towards social tenants, but then the underpinning regulation, which is all about consumer protection. This is what we're, I suppose, trying to do over the next kind of few weeks and months. So it really empowers the end consumer. So they first of all understand, as you said, what are the most long-term and impactful measures, what's it going to cost and what's going to happen to the property. But yeah, I completely agree on the PRS side. That's where a lot of people get caught, and in terms of they live in a subletted property, and it's the DPC has been gained just to kind of get through the minimum energy efficiency standards. So it is an issue, but we have to sort of work as an industry to keep raising the standards and ultimately educate the consumer and the private landlord.
Tony, do you want to answer the first thing, because it's directed at our elected colleagues?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see how the logic of spending money to improve energy efficiency and essentially take money off bills could be recouped through increased rents. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the mechanism would be. But certainly the way that the framework is set up would have to guard against that, because you don't want to give with one hand and take away with the other.
Fantastic. I have the gentleman over there with the...
Mike Simpson, a delegate from Brom. It seems that the only barrier to this taking off is the bad debt risk. I'm just wondering if there's anything that central government could do to resolve that or allay that.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important question. Julian, would you like
Yes,
to...
I believe the National Wealth Funds probably should be addressing this, and we have spoken to them. Because if they were to guarantee, say, 70% of the fund, and you looked at the non-merchant revenues, the contracted revenues, there would be no risk. And it's just about education, and my reason for being here today is, first of all, to tell government about it so they understand it.
Fantastic. The gentleman here.
I am Chris McGurk, delegate from Elton, which is South East London. Thanks for telling us about this scheme. I'm broadly supportive of it. It does sound like a good idea. I just wondered if you could speak a little bit more about what you assess the environmental impact of all these batteries being, because we are moving towards a society where there's more and more batteries, and as we know, there's an environmental impact when they're created, with mining, lithium, that sort of thing, and also crucially, what happens under your scheme at the end of the battery's working life? Is there arrangements for how you dispose of them?
Yes, I'll let Neil take this in a minute, but there is recycling schemes, obviously. One of my points here is when you're using fossil fuel, you're mining constantly, all the time. So you mine one time for lithium ion. Secondly to that, you've got to get, I think the feed-in tariff shows this in one sense. I'm not saying it was perfect on solar, but it created the industry, the price came down, so it didn't need a tariff. As we get more demand for batteries, a lot of people are working on the technology, there'll be lots more non-lithium batteries like the molten salt batteries. So there's a lot of work going on in that, and the scale of battery storage in the UK will bring that on quickly.
question here as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to CATL recently.
What is that?
They're 40% of the world's battery market, and they've just raised 34 billion on the Hong Kong stock market for a hungry factory and processing plant, and they'll recycle everyone's lithium. But you're right. You know, we in our package we've sort of priced in placing these batteries at the 15-year mark, and yes, recycling.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? There's a lady there.
Could make money and be part of that partnership, then they wouldn't have to put the rent up. They could be an offset for them. Instead of putting the rent up, they could get some of the payment in. I am a landlord.
It's a great point, and we're talking to North Yorkshire Council, and once the battery's paid off after 5 years or maybe 6 years, then there's quite a lot of money to spread around, and their answer was, with the money that comes, we will reduce the rents of the tenants. It's the same with a private landlord. It would absolutely work. Good point.
Sorry, can I just follow up on that? Because forgive my ignorance on this, but isn't the saving to the bill payer rather than to the landlord?
So
This is why we put the two of them in the middle.
So again, I don't want to be too technical, or people might not understand, but the solar that they use in the house is enabled to pay would be free. So first of all, they've reduced the bill by maybe £600. That's from the solar and battery. But the rest of the revenues are actually paid to pay the funder back. So when you go on the capacity market auction, you're actually receiving cash. And the same with arbitrage. You're trading, and it's buying the batteries, buying when it's cheap and selling when it's dear, and massive cash.
So the landlord is essentially the generator of electricity.
Exactly.
And the bill payer then doesn't have to pay much money for the bill.
Yes, and the battery's producing revenue, which pays back. And
does that occur before the battery is paid off, or only after the battery is paid off?
So the revenue comes all the time. So if you're looking in the private landlord, then they could go get finance for the system. In bulk, it probably costs, let's say, £9,000. So the tenant's getting a saving from the bill. They're getting cash to repay the loan. Once the loan's repaid, then they can reduce the rent and yes, spend on fabric.
That doesn't quite answer our colleague's question, does it? Because in the meantime, until the battery isn't paid off, then is there not an incentive to put the rent up? To cover your rent, to cover your loan repayments?
Not really. Again, if I'm going to go back to the model we've got, just one single house to show this. The lady has no bill and she has £1,500 in the bank. So if she's paying a £1,000 loan over 9 years, she's got £500 profit, which covers the landlords. Does that make sense? There's how you share the revenue out is probably key to the model.
It seems to me that how you regulate this is going to be key moving forward, because the thing that's clear to me is that this is not straightforward. We've got private landlords, we've got social landlords, we have to find that way. Do you want to come in?
I was going to say, just as an idea in terms of enhancing the PRS regulations, what you could do is, if this proves to be a very successful scheme, you could tie in so if they're tied into a program like that, they're mandated to keep spending money on constant improvements on so they can't use money elsewhere. There's something ties them in PRS regulations to keep spending on money, whether it's a new roof or windows or wall insulation, etc.
Just to say too, and I have a few little general questions at the end, just to see, just to get a straw poll, so to speak. But government is already putting quite considerable money into NHS foundations by way of solar paired with energy storage. I'm conscious that there's a lot going on in schools, particularly. So there's an organisation called Solar for Schools and other organisations that are delivering energy storage into schools. So clearly, the government is starting to come behind this, and what we're trying to, I suppose, create today is the further debate. Just on that, who was aware of solar paired with energy storage, which could perhaps release revenues for fabric? Okay, so I think there's quite a lot of work to do, isn't there, really, about getting that message out and that opportunity